be sharing some really easy but really delicious fall recipes. Welcome to my channel and let's go ahead and get cooking. The first recipe I'm making is a tortellini soup. So it's basically a tomato-based soup and then with some tortellini noodles in it. So the first thing I'm doing is dicing up this onion. Next, I'm going to cut up some chicken sausage. So the recipe calls for spicy Italian sausage. I just bought this sweet Italian chicken sausage. I originally wanted like a spicy chicken sausage, but I couldn't find it at the store. So just use whatever kind of sausage you'd like, but it turned out really well with this chicken sausage. So I'm just going to kind of quarter it and then I'm chopping it into little pieces since I'm not using like the ground sausage. I will include the original recipe in the description, so if you want to kind of go back and look for that exact recipe, you can. Now I'm just setting the chicken sausage aside so I can go ahead and work on the garlic. I'm going to go ahead and mince the garlic. I have microplane, but you can use just ground garlic or like pre-minced garlic from the refrigerated section. I normally use ground garlic for pretty much everything, but I bought a giant tub of just garlic cloves and I've been going through that and I actually notice a difference. It's just more, it provides more flavor, but you know, anything works for this. So I'll just mince up all of these garlic cloves. I'll go ahead and set the garlic off to the side and I'm going to get started on the cooking part of the recipe. The first thing I'm doing is adding a bit of olive oil to the pan. And then I'm adding my chicken sausage and onion. The original recipe calls for just regular sausage, so you'd want to brown that first and then add your onion. But since mine's already pre-cooked, I'm just going to add everything at once. I'm just going to cook this until the meat has browned a little bit and until the onion is cooked until it's like translucent. A bigger pan probably would be a good idea. My baby is currently sleeping where the pan is. It's kind of a long story. So I'm just stuck using this little one. While that is cooking, I'm actually crushing my own tomatoes. I bought the wrong kind, so I'm just using this potato masher to crush them. This has been cooking for about 5 minutes. I don't know if you can tell, but the sausage has a little bit of color on it and the onion is translucent. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more ingredients. I'm going to go ahead and add the garlic now that I minced up. Cook that just for about 30 seconds so it's not raw anymore. Now I'm adding in 2 cups of chicken stock. Those tomatoes that I partially crushed myself. I'm going to add some water. I'm adding some oregano and some basil, a little extra. Just a little bit of salt. I used reduced sodium chicken broth, and I'll add a little bit of pepper as well. I'm going to give this a gentle stir, and then I will come back and add the tortellini once it has simmered for a little while. I also want these tomatoes to break down a little bit more. As you can see, they're still pretty big. I definitely recommend just buying the right kind of tomatoes. Just buy crushed tomatoes. This is not in the original recipe, but I am also adding just a tiny bit of sugar. I feel like it really helps balance the acidity of the tomatoes. Since I can't get my other pan, I am just going to take some of this out and put it in another container so I can cook the tortellini. And then I'll add everything back together. Now I'm gonna drop the tortellini in and I will give it a little stir, and I actually went ahead and just added all of the soup kind of base that I took out before since it could fit. This recipe is really simple, but I think it seems more complicated since I had to keep taking out the ingredients just because my pan was too small. The recipe didn't call for spinach, but I thought it would be a really nice addition. So I went ahead, added that, and then I also added some Parmesan cheese on top. The recipe calls for some like cream in it, but I actually didn't have cream until a little bit later. So I did add it to our individual bowls when I served it up a couple hours later. But you can add it kind of at this point if you would like and just stir it up.
So at this point, I did add my cream when I was just serving the individual portions, and I added extra Parmesan. We liked this soup. It was a lot of food, so we had leftovers, but we would make it again. The flavor was really nice, and I loved the tortellini instead of just normal noodles. For dinner this night, I made a slow cooker ginger chicken. So again, I'm starting with an onion and I'm dicing it up. Once the onion was cut, I went ahead and removed it from the cutting board so I could start on the garlic. So I'm using garlic cloves. You can just use like ground garlic or just pre-minced garlic. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the ends, and then I'm just going to mince it up as small as I can just with a knife. I did have my little helper who wanted to eat some raw garlic, and no one really wants that. When I was done cutting it, I removed that from the cutting board and I went ahead and got my next ingredient going, which is jalapeno. I'm using a bag just on my hand because one time I cut up a jalapeno and the oils got on my hand. My hands were burning so bad and it took forever to get that out. So I just use a bag, but you can use whatever. You don't have to use anything. So I'm just going to cut these up into really little pieces as well. I also took all of the seeds out just because I didn't want it to be too spicy. Now that everything is cut, it's all about just throwing everything into the crock pot. So I'm adding 1.5 pounds of chicken breast to the crock pot, and then I'm adding apricot jam. It sounds weird, but I think it's just to kind of add like a sweetness and more depth of flavor. And then I'm pouring in tamari, but you can just use soy sauce. And then I will put in some ketchup. I also added in some ground ginger and just a little bit of water to make sure there was enough liquid in it. And then I just dropped in all of the chopped onion and jalapeno and garlic that I chopped up. And that's it. So this is simple, but it does involve a little bit of chopping. So I'm just going to cover it and then I'm going to cook it on low for about 6 hours. I'm also going to throw together a coleslaw, which is really different than what the original recipe calls for, but I think it really balances out kind of the sweetness of the chicken just to have kind of like a tangy and a little bit spicy coleslaw. So I'm just using a coleslaw mix. You can definitely buy your own cabbage. I pick out all of like the bigger chunks, and then I'm going to add some mayo, some salt and pepper, and then also just a little bit of the tamari just to kind of meld the different components of the dish together. I also like to add just a tiny bit of sugar to kind of balance the acidity, and I went ahead and cut up some cilantro and some green onion. Fast forward about 6 hours, the chicken is now cooked, so I'm going to go ahead and shred it. I normally just shred it in my crock pot, but I know a lot of people kind of take it out and use like a KitchenAid or, a handheld mixer or something like that. I just find it just falls apart almost when you just use 2 forks. Once I shredded it up to my liking, I did go ahead and add vinegar and also just a tiny bit of cornstarch just to kind of thicken up the liquid. And then I stirred it all together and I just turned the crock pot off and I put the lid back on just so the chicken could kind of soak up the juices and just so that it stayed warm until we were ready to eat it. I served this with rice. I used seeds of change rice. You can use whatever kind you'd like. I will show you the packaging here. And I went ahead and I just kind of compiled everything onto the plate. I love crockpot meals. It's so nice to just kind of have everything ready in the morning, throw it in, and then you don't have to worry about dinner all day. We really liked this. I will say it was a bit sweet, so next time I make it, I will add more heat. But it was tasty. I loved all the components together.
I'm making some pumpkin pancakes. I'm starting with milk and then the pumpkin. I'm sure we've all had pancakes before, but I thought these just sounded really fun for kind of the fall season, especially if you like pumpkin. I do like pumpkin. calls for an egg. I'm not going to use an egg. I'm going to use, this is flaxseed meal, and then I'm just going to add some water to it. Okay, and then I just stir it up, and then I let it sit off to the side for about 5 minutes. I'll just put everything else in there, and then I'll add this just so it thickens up a little bit. And 2 tablespoons of oil. I'm just going to use coconut oil. I don't have any vegetable oil. Calls for 2 tablespoons of vinegar. I'm just using this apple cider vinegar. Regular would work. This is baking powder and baking soda. And then I'm gonna add some seasonings. So this is allspice. This is cinnamon. I love cinnamon. My husband thinks I use it in too many different things, but I just love it. And I'll be adding some ginger, some salt. 2 more ingredients left. I have brown sugar. Add a few tablespoons. And finally, the last thing is flour. I'm going to use 1 cup of regular flour and another cup of whole wheat flour. You can just use all regular flour if you'd prefer. And you can see this thickened up really nicely. Can you see that? So I'm just going to dump that in. And I'll give it a good stir. I don't want to over mix it, so I'm just going to mix it just until it's mixed. Okay, that looks great. There's still a few clumps in there, so it's not overmixed. And I'll just set it aside until I'm ready to cook them. It's dinner time, so I have the pumpkin pancake batter. I'm gonna make some eggs, scrambled eggs with some green onion and a little cilantro and some cheese. Some butter in the pan.
And once the butter melts and the pan is hot, I'm going to go ahead and add the eggs, and then I'll scramble them up. I'm going to season my eggs with salt, pepper, some cheese, and then the cilantro and green onion that I had left over from other meals in the week. And you can see that I separated out because my toddler wouldn't like all of the kind of extra things.
And I'm actually just going to turn off the heat when it's not quite done. And that way it'll just finish cooking in the hot pan, and I'll get started on those pancakes.
I'm going to get started on the pancakes now. Ideally, I would have cooked the eggs and the pancakes at the same time, but I stored my pancake batter in the fridge for a couple of hours before I actually cooked it, and I wanted the pancakes to the batter to come to more of a room temperature. So I just waited a little bit before I cooked them. Dinner is now ready. I went ahead and served the pancakes with this Trader Joe's syrup. We loved these pancakes. I've actually made them again since this first time that I made them. They're kind of light and fluffy, and the pumpkin flavor is really nice. It's not overpowering, but it just kind of adds just a nice, deeper flavor to the pancake. I would highly recommend them.
I'm going to throw together a really quick pasta I saw on Instagram. So it's a pumpkin pasta, so I have some pumpkin puree, pasta parmesan, I'll throw in some garlic and some really finely diced onion. I don't have any shallot, and some whipping cream. And then I'll put in some olive oil as well. So I'm going to go ahead and make it now.
The first thing I'm going to do is cut up this onion. The recipe calls for shallot, but I didn't actually plan on making this recipe. I just saw it on Instagram a little bit ago. I'll leave the recipe below, but I thought, why not make it? It's pumpkin season, so it sounds fun. And I also have some leftover pumpkin from a pumpkin syrup that I made for pumpkin chai. I'll leave the link to the video I made for that. It's really good. So I made this pumpkin syrup, and I've kind of been using it in hot chocolate and just like a coffee latte and the chai latte.
And I'm just going to grate the garlic on this. I have the garlic and the onion ready. I'm just putting on a pot of water to boil. I'm actually doubling the recipe and making a whole pound of pasta. And then next I'll get the onion and the garlic cooking. This is for the onion and the garlic, all the sauce. And I'm gonna cook my pasta.
I'm adding some olive oil to the pan. I'm going to go ahead and put the onion in, and I'm going to cook it until it's translucent.
My water's boiling, so I'm gonna add the pasta. The onion looks nice, so I'm gonna add the garlic and just cook that for like a minute. I don't want it to burn.
And I'm also going to add in the pumpkin. So I'm going to add 6 tablespoons of pumpkin. I'm going to stir it up and cook it. It even says until it gets kind of brown and stuck to the bottom. I think we're just kind of like roasting it or sauteing it just to get that deeper flavor.
Pasta is coming off now. I'm gonna save just a little bit of pasta water and also just some plain pasta, so my toddler will definitely eat something for dinner tonight. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add the cream. This is heavy whipping cream. I'll add a cup. I'm gonna add salt, pepper, and just a little bit of cayenne. I would add more, but you know, toddlers, right? Give it a stir. I'm gonna add some Parmesan. It's a third of a cup. And then I will taste for seasoning and see how it is. And add that pasta water. And that looks so delicious. Look at that. I'm gonna try it. This is really good. It's like there's a hint of sweet with the pumpkin, a little bit of spice with that cayenne. It's creamy. It's a little bit cheesy with that Parmesan. Really delicious. It's only been about 15 minutes total since I started cutting.
We loved this. It's kind of like a healthier version of mac and cheese. I hope you enjoyed this video. I loved making these fall-inspired dishes. It's really fun to make things that you wouldn't necessarily make all year round, although these I definitely would because they're just so good. I make videos every single week, so don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next time.